One of the imperative talking points over the last few years, and especially in this generation, has been the emergence of microtransactions. A lot of you guys don't get it, a lot of you guys are annoyed by it, and I am definitely in that camp. A lot of games implementing microtransactions is really annoying. Thankfully, I feel like over the last year or two, a lot of publishers have moved away from using microtransactions, especially in single-player games. However, they are still very much prominent in multiplayer titles, and that does cause the ire of some gamers. However, if we can move away from them in single-player games, that is a pretty good thing, and you'll even see a lot of the times when it's announced that a game isn't including microtransactions, that actually makes headline news. It's kind of unfortunate that we have to put a spotlight on this idea that microtransactions aren't available in a game, thus that actually normalizes the idea that microtransactions is available in the majority of titles. If you actually think about how that works, why are you giving credit and highlighting and putting a spotlight on a game not having microtransactions unless that's become a norm in gaming? And that's unfortunately the route we had been going in for quite a while, but a lot of you guys don't understand it. But here is why microtransactions is such a major thing, and I've been giving EA a little bit of credit just because I feel like what they've been doing in the last few months to a year has been rather good. I thought Battlefield 5 was a pretty good game, even though the promotion for that game was absolutely butchered and it was a train wreck. I thought from a fundamental gameplay standpoint and the content it offered, I thought Battlefield 5 was a pretty good game. Good single-player campaign, good multiplayer, and guess what? They offered free DLC as well, so that wasn't an EA norm, and I thought that game was pretty good. I thought Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was tremendous. That game was a phenomenal release, and then we have had Apex Legends as well. Obviously, in the midst of that, we also had the release of Anthem, and that wasn't the best. But this idea that EA constantly offers train wreck after train wreck, I don't think is necessarily true. I think there are at times that EA does some good stuff. Are they at the caliber that they were once at when they were at their glory days and at the height of, gaming? No, I wouldn't say that, but I do think that they deserve a tiny, insy-binsy little bit of more credit than they deserve, just because they are seen by everyone as like the most hated publisher. Whatever the case may be, when you talk about microtransactions, it has become one of the biggest integral parts of EA and its revenue stream, because it has just came out. Business is booming from them on that standpoint, as EA has made almost $1 billion from microtransactions in the last quarter. I want to go over the article that GameSpot put out. Gaming giant Electronic Arts reported earnings for its holiday quarter, and the company performed ahead of expectations. In particular, revenue from EA's microtransaction bucket called Live Services reached nearly $1 billion. Another highlight was Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which I talked about earlier, but that game sold 8 million units, and they were expecting it to sell 6 to 8 million units within the first quarter. It's already broken that, and it looks to be selling within 10 million units in the first quarter, so that game has done really well. In a chart posted, EA made $993 million from live services during the quarter ended December 31st. For the 12 months as a whole in the fiscal year, EA made $2.835 billion from microtransactions. You can have a look at the chart and it goes over it, but that is a lot of money that they are generating from microtransactions. And with numbers like that, you can see why they were trying to implement it into a lot of other games and make it a more integral factor, because if they could get it over in games like Star Wars Battlefront 2, Battlefield, well then your revenue is going to exponentially increase on top of all of the other microtransactions you're doing. EA made a total of $1.593 billion in revenue for the quarter and $961 million in profits. So as you can see, microtransactions are very big business for EA. A major part of EA's microtransactions revenue definitely comes not from the games that a lot of you guys are aware about. It's not your Star Wars Jedi Fallen Orders, it's not your Battlefield 5s, it's not your, these single-player experiences or even multiplayer-focused titles. What it is EA sports games. FIFA, Madden, and NHL, you guys might not be aware if you're not super into the sports games, but now what they do is they also feature an Ultimate Team mode, and that is the main factor of microtransactions. I was shocked because I'm not really privy towards a lot of the insight on sports games. However, I do have a few friends that are super into Madden, and with the Super Bowl coming up, I talked to them about it, and it's not necessarily that they'll play Madden for the sake of playing Madden. Yeah, you'll play the Madden the traditional way and how it's expected to be played. However, this Ultimate Team mode is huge, and even if you say the whole vote with your wallet thing, I voted with my wallet, I'm not buying any games with microtransactions, whatever the case may be, okay, you might be in the camp where you didn't buy it, but let's say it's a 1-to-1 ratio. For every one person that decides not to buy the game, that other person still buys the game. And at the end of the day, the online community, it is a vocal minority. There might be hundreds or even thousands of people shouting at the rooftops, talking about down with microtransactions, down with sports games, yearly releases, or whatever the case may be. However, that is not indicative of the entire population buying these games. It might not be the most fortunate thing in the world, but this is reality and you have to come to accept it. And what reality is yeah, there's 1,000, there's 10,000, hell, let's say there's 100,000 people online talking about how awful microtransactions are, how they're not gonna buy any sports games, whatever the case may be. Let's say there's 100,000, well then, there's gonna be another 100,000 that's gonna be just as willing to buy these games still. They're not going online, looking up all the reviews of Madden and looking up everything they're doing with the game. They're just buying Madden every year. Then it's probably a lot more than 100,000. It's probably in the spectrum of multiple millions of people buying Madden every year. So for that person that isn't spending their $60, you've got all of these other people that still are spending their $60, and then you also have a portion of those people jumping on into the Ultimate Team mode and spending, we're not even being hyperbolic here, hundreds, even at cases thousands of dollars every year on these Ultimate Team modes. And based on what I know and how it works, it doesn't carry over year over year. I believe you get some bonuses or whatever, but once a new Madden game comes out, once a new FIFA game comes out, once a new NHL game comes out, whatever the case may be, you are back to square one and you are spending hundreds and thousands of dollars once again. So even if they're upsetting some people, if they're not upsetting enough people to really cause change in the Ultimate Team dynamic and things like that, it's not going to do a lot. And when they see revenue like this, immediately they're going to think, holy crap, we're making this kind of revenue off the EA Sports titles. How do we make that kind of revenue off Star Wars Battlefront? How do we make that kind of revenue off Battlefield? How do we make that kind of revenue on all of these other games that they release that are traditionally microtransaction free? Now, in the case of these other games, it's not the same with the Star Wars Battlefront 2. Star Wars Battlefront 2 does cater towards an audience that is more invested into gaming. When you're talking about sports titles, sports fans and these people that buy sports games, the majority of them are going to buy these games regardless. They're not going to be so turned off by something like Ultimate Team. Hell, honestly, with something like Ultimate Team, it probably gets them even more invested into the game. So I don't think that's really a major issue. And Ultimate Team is something that's completely separate from the core of the Madden experience. It's just an additional element. So I don't know necessarily how wrong it is for them to do that. However, in the case of like Star Wars Battlefront 2, when you start tampering with the core mechanics and the core idea of the game, that's when microtransactions really become an issue. In the case of these sports games, I really don't think it's a big problem, and I think that's part of the reason that there isn't this colossal uproar and rage that ensues when sports games do come out. I mean, there are the people that meme on yearly sports games releases and people that'll meme on other people spending $60 every year. I mean, do you even know how much money they're really spending, since Ultimate Team is such a big deal and they're generating so much revenue off of it? That, yeah, I can understand why EA was so committed to bring microtransactions into the fray with other games. Obviously, it completely backfired on them, as Star Wars Battlefront 2 ended up being a train wreck. Battlefield 5, they didn't even recover from that from a EA Games release. I feel like EA is still riding on the bad PR of all of their bad business practices that they did with their fundamental, games that in the past they wouldn't have microtransactions, but because they saw this kind of revenue, they decided to go this route. And obviously, it again backfired on them. To go over it again, EA made a total of $1.593 billion and $361 million in profit. So when you look at that $993 million from live services, you are talking about a significant portion coming from microtransactions, and they're making all kinds of revenues from that. I think if they can keep that kind of revenue, but also why not release the games that cater towards the audience that EA once built themselves on? The high quality games, the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Orders of the world, the quality BioWare titles of the world. I think it is possible to have the best of both worlds. I think you can have quality single player games and quality multiplayer games that don't go too heavy with these microtransactions and still have these games. Look, if you want to spend hundreds or or thousands of dollars on Ultimate Team, let them spend that money. What difference does it make to you? However, with these games like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Star Wars Battlefront, don't fundamentally ruin the integrity of the game by adding microtransactions. That's just unfair for the consumer, because at the end of the day, the integrity of FIFA, Madden, and NHL isn't really being ruined by Ultimate Team. You could have said, hey, in another world, maybe Ultimate Team would have been a free component that's in addition to these games or whatever, and we wouldn't be spending hundreds or thousands of dollars, but guess what? You've already invested yourself into this experience. In the case of sports games, yeah, I can understand why people would be upset with the inclusion of Ultimate Team having so many microtransactions. However, it's not as bad in the case of a game like Star Wars Battlefront 2, where the fundamental integrity of the game was being affected with all of the microtransactions that they tried to implement in that game. And I should also go back to the point that EA did go back on the microtransactions, but obviously they reviewed that, and they reviewed Star Wars Battlefront 2 as a whole after people made significant uproar. It's not like they were good intention and were like, hey, we gotta look at Star Wars Battlefront 2 again, we think we messed up, don't worry guys, we're gonna fix it. No, it's after all of the uproar occurred, and then EA went back to the drawing board and they decided to rebuild the game, and now what you see in Star Wars Battlefront 2 is actually rather good. But you get the idea. What they tried to do with Battlefront 2 and why it was such a train wreck was because they were literally ruining the fundamental integrity of that game, and if that game ended up being a success, that would have just opened the floodgate for EA to do it with a lot more games, and I think gamers really revolted on that end, and good on them, because if they didn't revolt on Star Wars Battlefront 2, I think the gaming landscape would be much more different than it is now. People saw the train wreck that was that game, and they realized, okay, with these games that are just traditional games that people know and love for a long time, I mean, Battlefront is an established franchise, even though EA's version is a little different. It's not a game people would expect the high level of microtransactions. People realize, okay, we can't overdo it on these games, and I think that taught a lesson to the entire gaming industry, because had that not been the case, I think we would see even more microtransactions and options like that in a lot of other games. Obviously, it's still a major thing in a lot of games, but I think it would be even more so had a game like Battlefront 2 been really successful, or some of the other games they put out, a lot of these single-player games with microtransactions. Had that been even more successful, I think people would try to push that proverbial envelope a little bit more. So make of that what you will. Sound off with all of your thoughts in the comments section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.